Hello and welcome to Pro Baseball World Tour here on the RTC Multimedia YouTube channel. Rick Crabb, and joining me as always from his palatial state in New York and soon to be headquarters for his campaign of Prime Minister of Taiwan, as well as the International Bobblehead Museum, Mr. Eric Marenbach. Eric, good to talk to you again this week. How you doing?
Another week of baseball in the books. A little bit of difference with COVID taking a back seat to other stuff that's going on. We got some doubleheaders to try and make up some games, and we're just rolling along.
Yeah, no doubt. In fact, it's funny you mention that. As we start with our tour with North America, this may be the first episode where we did not have any positive COVID tests in the Major League Baseball or any of the other leagues in North America. But we did have some other events happening. There were some social justice stories in the news. Basically, there was a shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin. A gentleman by the name of Jacob Blake was shot by a police officer, I believe 7 times. Oddly enough, he did not die from that. Last I heard, he was in a hospital paralyzed. But as a result of that, originally the National Basketball Association postponed some of their playoff matches for Wednesday and for Thursday, and Major League Baseball followed suit with some of their games, as did the National Hockey League. So if it's not COVID, if it's not a rain out, it's a social justice event out, Eric. I mean, gosh, what's going to happen next to Major League Baseball? I don't know. I feel like I'm jinxing them by asking that, but I don't know. What do you think of this whole situation?
Very difficult to tell, and it affected more of one race than another. I'm not going to get into any sort of racial issue. Mm-hmm. You had a bunch of teams with predominantly black players offering to either postpone their games or cancel or whatever. Totally understandable, given the circumstances. I mean, we've had so many issues over the last few months, whether it's virus-related or just news, race-related issues, that if it ain't one thing, it's another. I'm just glad that the virus kind of took backseat for at least a week.
Getting back to that, so yeah, we had some social justice issues affecting what's going on, but and as you mentioned, it looked like there were some doubleheaders to make up the games. And ironically, the day that many teams chose to do that was on Jackie Robinson Day on Friday. So, I mean, and I have another story related to that. This person wasn't an actual baseball player, but he played one on TV or in the movies, depending where you watch it, I guess. We had a tragic death of an actor named Chadwick Boseman. Now, most people know him for his role as the Black Panther in many of the Marvel Comics superhero movies. But he also portrayed Jackie Robinson in the movie 42. And ironically, Mr. Boseman died at 43 of colon cancer on that day. It shook up a lot of the people in the entertainment world. I thought it would be appropriate to bring up mainly because he portrayed Jackie Robinson in that movie. A lot of people commenting and giving their opinions. I don't know. What was your take on it? Are you a fan of those of the MCU movies or that movie 42 or anything that Mr. Boseman did? Or
well, I at first did not make any connection at all between who actually portrayed Jackie in the movie, and I actually, as big of a baseball fan as I am, I drew a blank. And then all of a sudden, it's all over the news. Chadwick Boseman dies, and just like everything came together.
Right.
And it became so eerie that if coincidence or not, it just it just kind of hit you.
Yeah, it's like I posted in our Facebook group. I said, if it's not a 2020 story, I don't know what is. I mean, it's just something that's just so off the wall and bleak and tragic all at once. It's, yeah, it's just something. But, and especially, I remember, you're going to laugh at this, though. You and I talk about it as far as, giveaways at the ballparks, that sort of thing. I remember going to an Orioles game it happened to be Jackie Robinson Day, and it was a giveaway for an Adam Jones T-shirt, pretty much. And I hadn't been to an Oriole game probably maybe a couple of years because of work and scheduling, all that kind of thing. So, of course, it's Jackie Robinson Day. Everybody's wearing 42. You don't know who the new roster is, and I'll give props to any major league announcer who can differentiate that. I mean, as far as I know they're given lineups before the games because I used to broadcast college games and had similar situations, but I don't know, the fact that, it's like, well, number 42 throws to number 42. I know they don't do that, but I mean, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting, but it's definitely a momentous day in baseball and, a momentous player and events surrounding him, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I know a lot of folks are talking about between what happened this week with the shootings and the other violence and the other things, saying, why can't we just watch sports, keep politics in and out of it? I mean, you would like that because you would want that as an escape, as you would, say, a movie or a concert or any other form of entertainment, but sometimes the two cross. And sometimes for good reasons, sometimes maybe for not so good reasons, but it happens. It's a part of life, unfortunately.
Well, at the same token, though, you would not have this if it wasn't an election year. You would have the violence, don't get me wrong, but violence happens every day of the year, but it kind of magnifies when you're in a presidential election and everything else has gone on top of it. So it's kind of...
Right, yeah.
It magnifies itself.
It seems like a lot of the issues magnify themselves, and especially when people in elections that are running, they magnify it themselves because they said, well, usually it's either the incumbent saying, well, if you elect the other guy, he's going to bring you these problems, and meanwhile the challenger is basically saying, well, if you re-elect the other guy, he's going to bring you the problems you already have and more problems. So they kind of help magnify it too, and it's, I don't know. Sometimes they go over the top with this stuff. I mean, on both sides. I remember seeing, I think on the History Channel, they had like old political commercials, and they had this one, I think it was, is George McGovern or something, it was a candidate in the late 60s or the early 70s basically saying that the other person wouldn't know what to do if there was a nuclear war, and, it's like, showed a picture like somebody just pushing a button and you see like a mushroom cloud. It's like, black and white. So, I mean, it's like trying to scare people. It's like, you elect this person, the Russians are going to nuke us. I mean, it's, I don't know. You've had that going on for years. You'll continue to do that. I mean, it's, both sides do it to an extent. Some of them do it different ways than others, but, I don't know. I kind of don't blame people for not wanting to talk about politics for a day, but because it's like everything else, as far as adult life, you just want to put it on the back burner. It's like, okay, I just got home from work. Work's being a pain in the butt. I pay these bills. The significant other's being a pain. The kids are getting on my nerves. Can I just watch some baseball? And sometimes you feel that way, and then it's like, then you have other things happen too, and it's just, Fun.
That's why I love things like the MLB package, because even if your local team isn't playing and you're still starved for a game, like, you could just turn on certain channels and put on any game you want from any different area. As a matter of fact, what I'm watching right now is the Reds against the Cubs, and it's the day after Jackie Robinson Day, but they've got a whole bunch of cutouts behind the home plate. I see Jackie, I see Ernie Banks, I see a whole bunch of old-time black players that are really the substance of the game in that era.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Actually, I think I saw something that last week. It was, and as much as we busted on this team in a few previous episodes, Eric, it was the Miami Marlins. They did a thing where I think they actually had a tribute to one of their Negro League teams. I think they may have worn uniforms, or I think they also had like you said, they had cutouts of some of their former players, so that's actually pretty cool. And I think when they did it, it was cool because they were also in black and white, so it's kind of like, kind of taken from old photographs and stuff, so that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's what these cutouts seem to be as I'm looking at the game now.
Right. We do have some good news for a change in Major League Baseball, though. We had another no-hitter this past week. It was pitcher Lucas, and I apologize if I've mispronounced his name, Lucas Giolito. He had a no-hitter, and according to this article from New York Sports Chicago, he said he achieved something no other White Sox pitcher has. And I'm guessing it doesn't have anything to do with throwing the no-hitter in a empty stadium, which, let's see. It says Giolito also had 13 strikeouts, and he said that's the most ever from a White Sox pitcher throwing a no-hitter. And this no-hitter was also the 19th no-hitter in White Sox history. The first no-hitter in White Sox history had 10 strikeouts. First White Sox no-hitter since Phil Humber's April 21st, 2012 perfect game. So congrats again to the White Sox and Mr. Giolito for that. I don't know. Did you get to see any of that game or any highlights or anything like that? I just heard about the score and I watched the highlights afterwards. But
I actually tuned in to the 7th inning on. One of the great things about all the MLB apps and stuff for your phone and your computer and stuff is as soon as no-hitters, perfect games start to get a little interesting. Mm-hmm. There's always a little thing on your phone saying, no-hitter watch, perfect game watch, so on and so forth. And you always get intrigued. As a matter of fact, the week before, you had basically a no-hitter go into the 9th inning for the Twins with Kenta Maeda, and he actually lost it the top of the 9th on a little bloop shot in the 9th inning, so that kind of sucked.
Yeah.
But here, Giolito had absolutely pinpoint control. He had a load of strikeouts. And, by the way, it's his first pro no-hitter, but his second no-hitter overall. He had one in Triple-A either the year before or the year before that, maybe 18.
Oh,
but he had one in Triple-A for the Charlotte Knights. And this is a guy who the Washington Nationals were touting as their number one prospect years ago. And he was involved in a trade for Adam Eaton.
No kidding.
And there was a lot of bad press about it because Giolito probably would have been your number 2 behind Strasburg. There maybe wouldn't have even been a need to sign Scherzer at the time. But could you imagine a 1-2-3 punch of Scherzer, Strasburg, and Giolito?
Wow.
And Adam Eaton, has become an integral part of the Washington Nationals, but when you give up a stud pitcher like that, and when he came to the White Sox, he wasn't as heralded as he was in the national chain. He was having his problems. He, I believe, has been up and down a couple of times, but he did throw that no-hitter in AAA. So I wasn't surprised at all. She's been breaking out for this White Sox team.
Oh, that's good. And that's good. He was able to bounce back like that. Now, I was listening to a national talk show earlier this week, and he brought up something interesting about that. First of all, the guy was like trying to do a hot take originally, which I thought sounded ridiculous. He was like saying, should they count a no-hitter if it's if it's this year in front of no fans? And it's like, of course they should if it's a complete game. But then he brought up a point. You're going to have these double headers with these 7-inning games, and if a pitcher throws a no-hitter, and he tried to create a little debate whether or not there should be it should count as a no-hitter. My opinion, the answer is no. Only because it should count for everything else. It should count for a win, a perfect game if he throws it, quality start, all of that. But, I mean, to me, a no-hitter should be 9 innings or more. I don't know. What's your opinion of that?
Well, and I've been to 7-inning hitters in the minor league, so as far as I'm concerned, if the parameters of the game are 7 innings, if it's a no-hitter, it's a no-hitter.
Right.
It's a perfect game, it's a perfect game. You've got to go within the parameters of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can go either way with that. Yeah, that's... But, I mean, I thought that was an interesting point that he brought up, and I'm thinking, well, maybe, I don't know, but... Well...
My friends actually brought up the point where not only is there no fans in the stands to witness it, but there's no ticket stubs. And you know how fans are big memorabilia buffs about saving special material. There's no ticket stubs to commemorate the no-hitter. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't count it. It was tongue-in-cheek, but it was still kind of funny to look at.
I actually saw somebody did this as a joke on an Orioles group. If you remember years ago after the Freddie Gray riots, they actually had National Guard vehicles throughout the city of Baltimore, and they had a curfew, and they even had an empty stadium game then between the Orioles and the White Sox. And he said what one person did, he had season tickets, he had a ticket stub to that game. He actually went to like a sports memorabilia place, had like a plaque made with, I guess, like a picture of empty Camden Yards with his ticket stub, commemorating the date and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, I thought that was kind of funny, but he hung it up in his man cave, I guess. But that is an interesting point. Now, I remember there was remember the Red Sox threw a no-hitter at Camden Yards years ago, and they did a thing where the Orioles were actually letting people buy commemorative ticket stubs for that. Like, I don't know, they created like a special ticket stub with the date and verified and all that other kind of stuff for that, for Red Sox or even Oriole fans or fans of other teams who just want, just commemoration of a no-hitter. You can get that. So that's a good point, though. Yeah, I mean, usually you think of that, and I think I told you in a previous episode, I kept a ticket to a no-hitter, that one between the Phillies and the San Francisco Giants that I saw, but
I have plenty of ticket stubs of no-hitters, perfect games, so on. Even the one international no-hitter that I've been to, which was in 2015, the Taiwan series, which wound up being a no-hitter pitched by a former major leaguer.
Oh, gosh.
That was kind of a cool thing as well.
I bet, I mean, not only going to games over there, but going to their World Series. I can imagine, I mean, the crowd's going wild in that, I mean, as far as the atmosphere and all of that, for sure. I mean, plus it's for the top prize.
When you get a Game 7 of their World Series, and it turns out to be a no-hitter, that is electric. And the funny thing is, and we'll probably go into it when we go into my part in the CPBL, you get guys that are former major leaguers going over, and they'll do something monumental like that. Oh my God. I had actually seen him and his wife before the game at the hotel. We're talking Pat Nish, former major leaguer with the Brewers, Giants, and several other teams. And his wife actually knew me, but she couldn't remember where she knew me from.
Oh, okay.
I was like, well, take your pick. Milwaukee, New York, and she just started laughing.
Oh, jeez.
Next thing you know, Pat pitches a no-hitter, and it was just awesome.
Oh, wow. So, again, you were probably good luck for him, too, just like you were for that doubleheader last week. So, that's awesome. All right, well, now we'll proceed to the standings of Major League Baseball. And this is as of today, which is the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, we'll start off with the American League East. We have the Tampa Bay Rays on top at 22-11. The New York Yankees at 17-13. The Toronto Blue Jays at 16-14. Baltimore Orioles at 14-17. Boston Red Sox at 10-22. The AL Central, we have the Cleveland Indians at 21-12. Chicago White Sox at 20-13. Minnesota Twins also at 20-13. The Detroit Tigers at 14-16. And the Kansas City Royals at 13-20. Wow. Going to the AL West, you have the Oakland A's on top at 22-10. Houston Astros at 17-14. Texas Rangers at 12-19. Seattle Mariners at 13-21. And the Los Angeles Angels at 11-22. Going to the National League, we have in the East the Atlanta Braves at 18-14. The Miami Corona Fish at 14-13. The Philadelphia Phillies at 14-14. New York Mets at 15-17. And the Washington Nationals at 12-17. The NL Central, we have the Chicago Cubs at 18-13. St. Louis Cardinals at 11-13. The Milwaukee Brewers at 14-17. Cincinnati Reds also at 14-17. And the Pittsburgh Pirates at 9-20. Finally, the National League West. The LA Dodgers at 24-10. San Diego Padres at 20-14. Colorado Rockies at 16-16. San Francisco Giants at 15-19. And the Arizona Diamondbacks at 14-19. So those are your standings for Major League Baseball. All right, Eric, do you have any else to comment regarding Major League Baseball or anything else in North America?
Well, good news. I'm finally able to shave. The Yankees finally broke their 7-game losing streak today.
Oh, gosh. Oh, you were rocking kind of like a playoff beard until they won. Oh, wow. That's... and,
it was frustration than anything else.
Right. And it looks like they finally got the Subway Series in it, I guess. Was that this weekend, or was that earlier in the week? Or
Yeah, that's going on now. The Yankees blew 2 games yesterday. Both their bullpens kind of imploded after some starting efforts. But today, they were able to hold out against the Mets. And ironically, the Mets closer imploded. And further irony, it was former Yankee Dellin Betances throwing a walk-off, bases-loaded wild pitch
oh, geez.
to score the run.
That's some crazy baseball. Now, I guess it might be different because of what's going on this year now. Do they still do the thing where, I remember they used to have, like, they would maybe do a day game in Queens and then a night game in the Bronx, like on a Saturday or something. Do they still do that, or they still just do, like, 2 at Citi Field and 2 at Yankee Stadium, or how's that work?
No, well, I'm sure you've seen it this year in the 7-inning doubleheaders that they've had. Schedule crunch. They've been having both games in the same ballparks with teams alternating batting, whether it's home or road.
Gotcha. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you have a lot of that throughout MLB this year because of the stupid virus and shortened season and rains and social justice outs and everything else. But
Exactly.
All right. Okay, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to move our world tour over to Korea and the KBO. You're listening to Pro Baseball World Tour here on RGC Multimedia YouTube channel. We'll be right back. All right, folks, welcome back to Pro Baseball World Tour. Rick Crabb, Eric Marin back. And as promised, we shifted our World Tour over to Korea with the KBO. A few things going on with that based on a few tweets I saw from Daniel Kim. It seems like they're still trying to keep an eye on the virus and control it. At first, earlier in the week, Mr. Kim said that there were concerns about the Seoul area, about the 3 teams that play there, and probably the 4th team being Suwon, the KT Wiz, which is, I think, only like 40 kilometers from Seoul itself. They were talking about possibly moving their games because of spikes in Seoul. Then I saw another tweet where the CDC over there, they were a little creative with the warning levels. If they would have went from level 3 to level 2, they would have had to stop the games. But they're doing something where they're going from 3 to 2.5, which basically means this. They're allowing KBO, I guess, sized assemblies, which includes the KBO games, but they're not allowing bars or restaurants to have indoor dining. I think they're resorting strictly to carry out or delivery. So seems like the government's trying to work with the KBO on that, and rightfully so. The KBO is doing everything right, and they're trying to provide safety for the players and the fans. And plus, I mean, they're the own structure that they created, as you know, Eric. Unlike Major League Baseball, if one player gets infected, the entire league agreed to shut down. They said, no, we're not going to be like MLB, have like 5 Cardinals and 2 Mets and 3 Reds or whatever that. No. One Doosan Bear gets infected, KBO shuts down for 2 weeks. And fortunately, that has not happened yet. So, good for them. What's your take on that?
It's very hard for this type of situation. Unfortunately, they committed to the thing, and now all of a sudden in the middle you get the breakout. Simple solution would be to move everybody to the uninfected area, but I guess it's not that simple. We had talked about separate CDCs. You're getting information from the CDC over here, and I thought that the CDC was global, but apparently each country has their own.
True.
So what you're gonna wind up happening is, I think that everything should just go on, and if for convenience sake only it goes to a different area, then so be it. But you've committed to a certain amount of games. I think you have to adhere to it.
True, yeah, I would agree with that. And again, we've also talked about the proximity of these teams. I mean, the farthest being, like, I don't know, maybe like a 5.5-hour drive from Seoul. So, I mean, usually we have a lot of weather causing issues with their games and causing rescheduling and that sort of thing. But, yeah, I don't see why they couldn't, especially some teams. Like, for example, I think Kia, they have 2 stadiums next to each other. They have their regular KBO season and stadium, and then next to it they have their Future League stadium, which I think used to be Kia's previous stadium. I think they're just repurposing it, so I guess they don't have to tear it down, or the taxpayers have a stadium that's torn down after they paid for it, or I'm not sure how they're structured. I don't know if the KBO does that with their teams and their stadiums like our leagues do. It seems like our professional leagues, they kind of want to hold cities hostage, buying us a shiny new toy, or, we're moving to Las Vegas or whatever. I mean, I agree. I don't see why they couldn't do it. And if Seoul wasn't the infected area, I don't see why they couldn't just make the Skydome in Kiwoom maybe make that like the bubble or something. And in fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they had the World Series, the Korean Series there, even though I'm trying to think if Kiwoom was one of the teams or not. I know Doosan won it, but I'm not sure if they played the Kiwoom Heroes there, or if it was just a neutral site and Doosan happened to win it there. But I'm sure the KBO hasn't figured out. I had even read also they had made some contingency plans where if they had to postpone a couple of weeks, they could still get their season in and still get their playoff seedings in order. But
I would think that it also has to be considered weather-wise. I'm not sure about Korea in their, well, what's considered our winter in the months of October, November, and so on. I know that in Taiwan, it's still rather warm and humid, but conditions in Korea may not be favorable to push things back in order to get certain amount of games in.
Right, true that, and maybe that might be another reason why to have it in the Kiwoom Heroes Sky Dome, but, and, you know, a perfect example of that, I was watching an Orioles Tampa Bay Rays game. As much as that stadium has had a lot of criticism, I was watching the game, and it's like they were showing inside the game, you know, the game was going on fine, and outside it looked like a typhoon. I mean, it was torrential rainpour outside. The sidewalks were flooded outside the Tropicana field sign, all that. So maybe that might be another reason to hold them. So all right. Okay, so now we're going to... I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, that's what I would go with, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's kind of a strange stadium, too, because the dome, I mean, it looks kind of like, reminds me of like the old Astrodome or the Humphrey Metrodome or something, or even Tropicana Field, but I think that stadium itself is fairly small for a dome stadium. I think it only holds like, I don't know, somewhere in the 20,000 range, 30,000 range, something like that, which kind of surprises me about all these KBO stadiums. I mean, some of them, they look like, pretty much they look like AAA stadiums, in my opinion, but some of them look like where I've seen like single or double A teams that have stadiums that are very similar to that with some of the same amenities and looks like same seating capacities, but well. But again, the league's been around for 30 years, so I guess they know what they normally draw. And you don't want to have a 60,000 seat stadium if your team only draws 10 or 20,000. So I don't think that would look good on TV. I mean, this year it wouldn't matter, but I mean, under normal circumstances, I don't think.
Well, it's the old field of dreams thing, where if you build it, they will come. I guarantee you that in a league like that, and this applies to not only Korea, but Japan or Taiwan, if you had a big enough stadium that could hold, let's say, a major league total of 50,000, the way that the enthusiasm is generated in Asia, I'm sure if you had a big enough stadium like that, you'll get people that'll show up. Some that might not even know the game as well, but especially around playoff time, you get these stadiums that fill the capacity and sometimes even standing room.
Right. Oh, I believe it.
That's without a pandemic. So.
Right. I believe it. I mean, even in this country, and I'm sure it's true there and other places too, a lot of times big events like that, sometimes it's more of a social event. It's you want to be seen there, that kind of thing. And especially, I mean, I remember they had that song Gangnam Style where they were talking about the high fashion district of Seoul, and it's just, you have a lot of celebrities in that city. A lot of people might not realize how big Seoul is. I saw on an ESPN broadcast, the whole population of South Korea is 50 million. Seoul is 15 million. So it's taken into consideration. I mean, New York is roughly 8 or 9 million. So you're talking almost double the population there, and you have 3 teams there. It kind of explains it, but still, that's a lot of people. So when they have these concerns about outbreaks there, I mean, I would imagine that would be a tough task to tackle, for a population that size. Especially if it's kind of like the larger cities here, like New York or LA or Chicago, where you not only have a large population base, but you have tall office buildings. I remember, like, one of the reports in New York, one of the things they were concerned about were elevators going to, like, these tall office buildings and skyscrapers and stuff. So I imagine they had similar problems in Seoul. So you would know more about that than I, since you're in the...
Yeah, you've also got the big chains in the Seoul area that I'm sure during this pandemic are hurting. I mean, I can tell you during the WBC, when Team Israel was playing in South Korea, they were saying that I know the Israel team was staying at the JW Marriott, and I had a friend on the team, and his parents were telling me that the rooms in general go for $450 American a night.
Oof.
Put that in a pandemic situation where a major hotel chain like that is going to lose money because of people not staying.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I don't doubt that one bit. I know locally here, there was for a while, they did not allow anyone to go to hotels unless you were considered essential personnel, like medical, or if you were there on essential business, or that kind of thing. So I imagine something similar would be there. But although with Seoul, I'm sure they did receive some kind of hit, but it's not only their capital, but it's also like their financial center, so it's kind of like having Washington and Wall Street in the same city. So, I don't know, it's probably still a hit, I don't doubt it, but, you probably still might have some businesses for those things for that reason, but... Alright, well, anyway, let's proceed to the standings for the KBO. We have the NC Dinos at 55-34-2. The Kiwoom Heroes keeping pace with them at 58-40. The LG Twins at 54-40-1. Doosan Bears at 52-40-2. The KT Wiz at 48-42-1. And then under the top 5 playoff spots, we have the Lotte Giants not far behind at 46-43-1. The Kia Tigers at 47-44-0. The Samsung Lions at 43-50-1. The Wyverns at 32-62-1. And finally the Fighting Hanwha Eagles at 26-66-1. So, still a tight race in the KBO. Still trying to get the games in. Still, bullpens are still giving up runs. I don't know if you watched it, Eric, but I was watching the Tuesday game where I think it was Doosan against, I think it was Kiwoom was their opponent. All I know is Doosan was fielding at that time, and Mr. Eduardo Perez, he's definitely one of my favorite announcers on the ESPN as far as analysts. That poor man was having a meltdown. He was like saying, sometimes I watch these KBO bullpens and I forget English, I revert to Spanish. And he's going, oh yeah. And he was just going off. It's funny. But, he was talking because they had should have been like a routine force out at second and the ball was dropped. And then you had these other fielding errors. And then KBO bullpen being a KBO bullpen. And the opponent wound up scoring, I think, 7 runs in that inning. It was ridiculous. But, I don't know. You and I have spoken about this a lot. And KBO fans are like, yeah, been there, done that, but still, it's so funny to watch this after, watching other leagues, even MLB or NPB, or CPBL.
Right. One good thing as far as with the KBO hitting the international stage, and it's basically the fault of the rotations, the way that they are, not necessarily due to rescheduling or viruses or whatever. You've got Toronto and St. Louis pitching former KBO pitchers on the same day in Hyun-Jin Ryu and KK Kim, and both excelling. I was watching Kim's game. He wound up getting a no decision, But he gets bailed out by a couple of double plays, and he pitches really well. Rhea, the same thing. So you've got good global appreciation for the game.
Yeah, another part of that, Daniel Kim was commenting about this, because he's been following Hyun-Jin Roo's career in Toronto, and he's kind of like, I think he's kind of adopted the Blue Jays as his team largely because of that. He showed an actual clip from a game that Toronto played against the Orioles in Buffalo, where their signage behind home plate, they actually had a Korean ramen company advertising on the left, and I think it might have been a brand that Hyun-Jin Roo may have endorsed at one time, but he actually took a picture of it and he kind of like circled that ad in the back, which was kind of interesting. So Daniel Kim's in touch with that as probably as much as anybody in the world. So there's definitely some cross international viewing from Korea and the United States, and it's a good thing. I've actually wound up buying some food and beverages that I've seen advertised on the KBO teams, going to like Lotte Marts and other supermarkets and liquor stores in Asian neighborhoods here in Maryland, just so I can buy those products because they don't have them anywhere else. But
yeah, there's the same in New York. There's H Marts and all different Chinese supermarkets. So
right. Yeah, it was. I think those are the two chains here. That's probably two big Asian supermarket chains everywhere in the U.S. It's the H Mart and the Lotte Mart. But yeah, but some good times. So once again, it was fun with the KBO and fun with the Korean players coming to the U.S. and I wouldn't say making it big, but making it big impression or having success. So. I don't begrudge a player from going from one league to the other, and I don't want to be like an ESPN announcer and say, disregard. It's like, well, great, he did stuff in the KBO, but what can he do here? It's like, no, baseball is baseball, dude. They're professionals, so I don't know. So other than some of the fielding and pitching issues, and I think with KBO, really, it's more the fielding, I would think, because there have been a few times where there have been some pitchers, they would throw some ground balls that should have been double plays or force outs, and you wound up having like a 6-run rally after a mistake. And one other thing I observed too, Eric, and it's your take on this. I don't know if this is because of the pandemic or this is standard form with KBO. Seems like a lot of their players are younger. I mean, they've been having several players, especially the pitchers, that are like 17, 18, 19 years old. I mean, we're used to that here where they be just going out of high school and either playing in college or playing like rookie or A ball at that age. I don't know. I guess it's different. I'm guessing it's different in the KBO with that. I mean, I know they have the future leagues, but it makes you wonder how young those players are.
Right. Basically, in Asia, there's not that much of a minor league system, a tiered minor league system like we got in America. Mm-hmm. So these kids are basically getting thrown into the fire. The higher draft picks are going, right to the big club, whereas some of the lower draft picks are being featured in futures leagues. Mm-hmm. To at least hone their skills and get called up when necessary.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, they had like different tiers on that. Oh, that reminds me, there was a story I meant to mention this in the Major League Baseball, but it kind of affects this too. There was talk about having with MLB and the minor leagues in MLB of having what they call a baseball cup, which is basically, it was kind of like a tournament where you would have Major League and minor league teams competing each other for a trophy. Now, it was compared to some tournaments that they have in Europe for soccer, and they also have it in this country, actually, for pro and semi-pro leagues, and called the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup, where they'll have, like, I don't know, semi-pro teams, like they'll have, like, I don't know, a team from Ocean City, New Jersey take on I don't know, like the LA Galaxy or NYCFC or, an MLS team or something like that, where they would actually have tournaments and brackets and all that kind of stuff. At first I read it, I'm thinking, wow, are they going to do, like, Premier League and have, like, relegations and stuff? The Orioles will probably be stuck in AA or AAA if that happens. But, I don't know. What's your... And Daniel Kim even joked about it. It's like, well, can they enter some KBO teams in there, too? It's like, That would actually be fun to watch, even though he was joking about that, of course. But, I don't know. What's your opinion of such a tournament? I don't know.
Well, we have that in a way with the WBC, but that's every 4 years. If something like this were to develop every year to globalize the game even more, hey, I'm all for it.
Yeah, he said they were talking about doing this annually, and so how they do it with... Because I used to have press creds for DC United and a few local soccer teams here. How they would do it is, it would be during the regular MLS season, but they would have kind of like, I don't know, MLS would have, they'd have like a few teams in the brackets, and then they'd have like, they actually have kind of a similar association with soccer where they have like the NASL and they have USBP, they have like different USL and like different leagues of professional soccer, and they would actually compete and have like a bracket, and they would have a tournament and a trophy during the season. Now, a lot of times what would happen is the MLS teams would basically sit out their main starters so they don't get hurt for the regular MLS season, and so they would kind of like play down to, say, I don't know, like FC Brooklyn or something, and then they would, a lot of times you would get some close, tight soccer matches because of that. So, I don't know, if baseball does something like that, so you can see, like, I don't know, the Staten Island Yankees against the Boston Red Sox, that would be kind of cool, so.
Logistically, I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
But, hey, that's why so many roles have been kind of fooled around with this year. It's all experimental, and if it works, it works.
Right, and plus, with anything with Major League Baseball or Minor League Baseball, or both of them, you have to go through the players' unions, too. And if they're such a powerful union, if they put the kibosh on it, it's not going to happen anyhow. But, like you said, that's a good point. There's logistics as far as travel, as far as broadcast rights, I would imagine, as far as... And logistics, especially if you have these minor league teams. They call the Single A the bus leagues for a reason, you know what I mean? It's just, you'd have some team like out of Myrtle Beach having to travel to Seattle. That might create a problem. I don't know. But
it's just like in the independent league for the last couple of years. My league over here at the Atlantic League, they did something stupid, and they put a team in Sugar Land, Texas. Logistically, probably the stupidest thing they probably ever could have done, just from the travel aspect. They were trying to book deals with Southwest Airlines, with travel and all that, hotels, and they were finding that it didn't work. Let's say Sugar Land would come up to play the Long Island Ducks. Okay?
Right.
It would have to be 4 or 5 game series, and not only that, from that area of Texas, there were no direct flights. So these teams from Sugar Land, they were actually stopping, I believe, in Baltimore first, and then transferring in order to fly over to MacArthur. So, logistically, putting a team with the moniker of Atlantic League, where it's more or less Eastern Seaboard type teams,
right,
ridiculous.
I agree. I had heard of the Sugar Land League, but I thought it was just another independent league there. I didn't know they were part of the Atlantic, because I'm a little bit familiar with them. I know, like, there are some teams, I think. There is one in Maryland called the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. that Brooks Robinson, I think, had a hand in owning. And then also nearby in Pennsylvania, they have teams in York, Lancaster, and I think it was York and Lancaster. And then they have like the Newark Bears and Long Island Ducks and those teams there. But yeah, I didn't realize Sugar Land was doing it. That's kind of crazy. It almost reminds me of in hockey, they have a league. They don't even spell out what the initials are anymore because it used to be called the East Coast Hockey League. But, I mean, they expanded a little further west to, like, Johnstown and in West Virginia. And the next thing you know, they have teams in California and Alaska. And it's called the East Coast Hockey League. Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. But, yeah.
Yeah, three different hockey leagues at the time. You had the AHL, the American Hockey League. You had the IHL, which was the International Hockey League.
Right.
And those were more or less AAA leagues, and then the league below that was the ECHL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of like the double A. Yeah. Which
was more like a single A, double A type level.
Right.
But then when teams started to fold and or move leagues, it just made no sense at all.
No.
But that's minor leagues in a nutshell for you anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at least not for that league. I mean, I remember the IHL. I used to have, like, a few of their jerseys. I mean, I think they had teams, like, in Kansas City and Chicago. They had, like, a lot of big cities, and even cities that had NHL teams. But yeah, that's a lot to go on. All right. Well, with no disrespect to our friends in Canada who enjoy hockey, this is Pro Baseball World Tour. We're going to take a quick break in a little bit, and then we'll go to Eric's part of the world, Taiwan and the CPBL. You're listening to Pro Baseball World Tour here on the RTC Multimedia YouTube channel. We'll be right back. All right, folks, welcome back to Pro Baseball World Tour. Rick Crabb, Eric Marin back. And as we do every week, we defer to Eric's expertise in the CPBL. All right, Eric, what's going on with our friends in Taiwan this week?
Lions are actually holding their own as far as first place in the second half. They've had some good games against both Rakuten and Suban, and Brother for that matter. And like I said, their pitching is starting to come around. They're starting to get the word of former Major Leaguer Jaime Navarro. And they've also got a big boost back from one of their guys that was demoted to the minor leagues, who was actually a former Yankee draft pick at one point. They demoted him to the minors, believe it or not, because of a DUI.
Oh, jeez.
And it was, I didn't understand it at all, why they actually demoted him.
Mm-hmm.
But since he's been back, he's gone back to the power numbers that he's had. And it's just reflecting on the team as a whole.
Huh. I wonder if maybe he had shown evidence of a drinking problem before that, and they were just trying to cover it up. But then when he got in the news with the DUI, I guess they couldn't. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, tell me how that league works as far as like fines and suspensions, that kind of thing. I mean, is it something where the CPBL commissioner can say, okay, look, we're fining you this game for off-field conduct or anything like that? Do you have anything like that over there, or?
Not that I know of. And that's why I said it was a surprise that when the news of the DUI actually came out, there was no suspension or anything, but an immediate demotion to their minor leagues. And it caused me off guard.
Yeah.
But apparently the system that they use.
Right, yeah. It makes you wonder, too.
They kept them down there for a good period of time.
Huh.
Now, whether there's any sort of rehabilitation that gets done while you're in the minors, don't know.
That might have been it too. That's a good point. That's the only thing I could figure. Because I don't know. It's like if say I was owner of the Orioles and I had a guy who got in a DUI and hurt somebody else, I wouldn't send him to Bowie or Frederick or anything. I'd see what his contract is. I'd probably either put him on a DL or cut him. I mean, I can't see you operating a car, killing someone in Baltimore, and then sending him down to Bowie and letting him work otherwise. I mean, what's to stop him from doing the same down there? But yeah, I don't know. That is kind of puzzling, though. I would admit.
And also, when it comes to the exchange of quote-unquote foreign players, when you see the transaction wire in the CPBL, I'm not sure if it's the same way in Japan and Korea, but you do not get released or designated for assignment. In the CPBL words, what translates into English, you more or less get fired.
Right. Well, DFO's almost like that, except that you're eligible to be picked up by other teams. But yeah, I don't know. That's what I was kind of getting at with my example, though. I know leagues and regulations and union status and all that's different here with contracts, but I mean any other job, though. I mean, it's like like the job I'm starting this week, for example, it's with shipping, and there's a lot of machinery and bringing in supplies to make generators and that sort of thing. And it's like, I don't know, if I'm coming in there looped up, riding a forklift or something, I could hurt somebody and I would totally expect to get fired, probably any other business you would expect that. So I guess things are different in professional sports, even in Taiwan, but still. Yeah, it's, like I said, it's puzzling.
Life in a big city.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, well, we're going to go to the four big cities of Taiwan, if you will, or at least the four teams that play there. We'll go to their standings. We have the Uni Lions. They're at 14-10-1. The Fubon Guardians at 12-11-0. China Trust Brother Elephants at 11-13-1. And the Rakuten Monkeys at 11-14. So things are still close, but it looks like the Lions and the Guardians might be pulling. Well, it looks like more so the Lions might be pulling away just a little bit, but we shall see. When does the season generally end down there, Eric?
Well, they tack on any rainouts at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the halves. So there have not been as many rainouts in the second half as there was in the first. So the postseason, per se, should go right around the middle of October.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, Now, do they have, well, it's only 4 teams, but do they have a system like we have under normal circumstances where we can expand the lineup or something like late in August, early September? Do they have anything like that, or?
You mean like roster expansion?
Right.
Not that I know of.
Not to know. Okay. All right. Well, as we've seen before, it looks like it's still interesting baseball in the CPBL. Still close race, but it seems like it's opening up a little bit. So, all right, Erica, do you have any more comments about the CPBL? As soon as I can say it.
I just think that it's cool with 4 out of the top 5 pitchers ERA-wise are all foreigners.
Mm.
You've got Jorge De Paula, leads the league in ERA at 3.76, followed by former KBOer Henry Sosa of the Guardians at 4.19, Ryan Carpenter of the Monkeys at 4.21, and Miranda of the Brothers at 4.37.
Now, is
Their
that
own pitcher? their own pitchers seem to be faring poorly.
And it's somewhat similar to KBO. Is that a normal trend with the CPBL, or do they tend to have better foreign position players, or how does that usually work over there?
It's been trending that the guys that do come over from, say, the independent leagues or whatever, and they get signed to Taiwan, and I'm sure this is the same way in Korea and Japan, the majority of them are pitchers. You do get a few position players here and there. I believe at one point last year, they had my only prospect, Alex Liddy, on the Brother Elephants, who was an infielder, outfielder kind of situation. But it's more pitching than anything.
Okay. That's interesting. All right, very good. All right, folks, we're going to take our final break, and then we're going to move our world tour over to Japan. And I'm going to talk, in addition to news in the NPB, I'm going to talk about some news in Australia as well. You're listening to Pro Baseball World Tour here on RGC Multimedia. We'll be right back. Alright, folks, welcome back to the Pro Baseball World Tour. Rick Crabb and Eric Martin back. And as promised, we will shift our focus over to Japan. Trying to find some news in Japan other than just actual baseball news. That's one thing I feel guilty about with this show, Eric. I'll be honest with you about our coverage of the NPB. They haven't had any issues seemingly with COVID or controversies. I mean, usually the stories I read about Japan is straight up baseball news. It's scores, it's throwing no hitters, it's that kind of thing. It seems like, unfortunately, in a way, Japan seems to have its act together, and as a result, sometimes it gives us less to talk about. I'd rather have that in a way compared to, Major League Baseball. All we talk about, it seems like, are either suspensions or positive COVID tests, or social justice uneasiness here in the U.S. But I don't know. Have you heard anything interesting? I mean, anything odd regarding the NPB?
Kind of quiet. Other than last week, we had a Bala no-hitter. There's been nothing really notable in NPB. And I know this is the wrong thing to say. Like I know in major leagues, the shut up and play attitude is kind of frowned upon.
Right.
But that's what the guys do. And the less you're in the news, the better it is to the league.
Right.
That's what seems to be going on in MPP. They're just going through the motions, growing to the business, and going home every day. There's been no noticeable rainouts. Mm-hmm. Everybody's been getting their games in and continuing their season on.
And I'm finding this seems to be especially true with the Central Division teams. We were talking about them as far as television coverage of their games, where it seems like the Central Division teams are more steeped in tradition and don't want to budge as far as rule changes or that sort of thing. It's kind of like MLB to an extent, but I think more so over there. I mean, but I don't know. It's so to our friends who are listening to us for MPB coverage. I mean, we're providing what we can find, but fortunately or unfortunately, we just have strict baseball talk. We can talk about scores or standings and that kind of thing. So let's proceed to that then, shall we? We will go to the standings in the Central Division. We'll start off with the Yomiuri Giants at 34-21-3. The Yokohama Bay Stars at 31-27-3. The Hanshin Tigers at 28-28-3. The Junichi Dragons at 27-31-4. The Hiroshima Carp at 24, 29, and 6. And the Yakut Swallows at 23, 31, and 5. Going to the Pacific Division, we have the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks at 36, 23, and 2. The Chiba Lotte Marines at 34, 25, and 2. The Rakuten Golden Eagles at 31, 27, and 3. The Nippon Ham Fighters at 29, 29, and 3. The Saibu Lions at 25, 32, and 1. And finally, Adam Jones and his Oryx Buffaloes at 19, 38, and 3. Those are the standings for the NPB, our friends in Japan. Any thoughts or comments about that, Eric? Or
nope.
Nope.
Kind of the no news is good news kind of thing.
Right.
The one thing that I kind of like about NPB, and I know it's going to sound a little risque, but I kind of love their playoff, where it's not even the final, but over there in Japan they call it the climax series.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. Oh, no. Yeah, and some of the names of the teams, it's like, oh, geez, I don't know if you want the Yakut Swallows involved in that. But anyway, okay, I'm going to cut that out of the YouTube, okay? But oh, maybe not. I might leave it in. What the heck? It's our show.
No,
Come on.
that's a great segue.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, in other news throughout the world, this may be what we may be talking about in the wintertime, Eric, as far as stovetop baseball news. This is a league that'll actually be playing regular season games because of their geography, because they're in basically the opposite corner of the world. Well, I have a couple stories from the Australian Baseball League. Now, according to this report from one of the teams, the Adelaide Giants, they have set up a season structure. Now, this is why I like doing this show, Eric, because I'm learning more and more things about other leagues in other countries and other continents and that sort of thing. The Australian Baseball League, they actually have two conferences where one is Australian cities. The other, they actually have cities from, looks like New Zealand, and they have a team from Korea playing in their league. Let me go over this little graphic that I see. They're going to be starting for their 2021 season. Looks like in the Australian Conference, they have the Canterbury Cavalry, the Melbourne Aces, the Perth Heat, and the Sydney Blue Sox. And I have a story about the Sydney Blue Sox later on I'm going to mention. And then the International Conference, they have the Adelaide Giants, the Auckland Tastara, I believe, the Brisbane Bandits, the Geelong team from Korea, and then they say a possible international team. So they might actually get like an international all-star team that they might pick up. Now here's what's interesting about this, Eric. Much like Major League Baseball, it used to be you had one league had a DH, the other one not have a DH. It looks like your two leagues within the Australian Baseball League will have different rules as well. The games in the Australian Conference will have 9 innings, where the International Conference with the New Zealand and Korean teams will have 7 innings. The Australian Conference teams, they'll be home and away as normal, but the International Conference says it'll be mixed, primarily a hub in New Zealand, with Adelaide and Brisbane to host one series. And then the playoff format, they said they'll play each team in a four-game series at home and each in a 4-game road series. And then for the international division, it says under 4-team model play each opponent 8 times, and the 5-team model play each opponent 6 times. And then they have a statistic for interconference, which I guess in the past they've done that. This year they have under both columns 0, which means they're not going to play each other, I guess, until they have like the Australian Championship or whatever they call that. Well, now I thought that's interesting that the Australia branches out and includes New Zealand and Korea, which geographically and flight-wise I guess would make sense, but I don't know, I didn't know that they actually did that, so I don't know, that looks like it's pretty interesting. It looks like be a fun league to cover, in the winter months. What do you think?
Okay. I watch the Australian baseball leagues in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And it has expanded to not only New Zealand with the Auckland Tuatara, but it has expanded to a city in Korea called Geelong.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I mispronounced that, so I apologize, folks. But
And they're also contemplating the international team that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking of bringing Taiwan into the mix.
Interesting. Okay. Now I know. Yeah.
It's a global thing. As a matter of fact, there have been a few minor leaguers that have been spread around Major League Baseball and minor league baseball that have come from Australia. More famous one being Luke Hughes, who for many years was with the Twins.
Okay.
Their international teams in like the WBC have fared well.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just trying to grow the league. And in fact, one of the teams, the Adelaide Giants, who used to be the Adelaide Fight, is owned by former Yankee Pat Kelly.
No kidding. Huh. That's interesting.
And their championship, by the way, is called the Clacton Shield.
Clacton Shield, okay.
Their games are actually on YouTube. It'll be Thursday through Sunday once the season starts. And the league just keeps growing. Right now they're 18th. And they want to grow it to 10. Because back in the day, in the old ADL, I believe there was 12 teams.
Okay.
This is more of a newfangled situation, and it's globally growing.
And it's probably a smart way to go. They can work with the other markets and all too. I know it's like with watching the KBO also. I understand that some of the teams do their. I know you and I have spoken about teams that will come to the United States. They've had a few teams that have also done their spring training in Australia. I think the KB Twins might be one of those. But so that's interesting that they incorporate Korea into this league and hopefully Taiwan into that league. And it has me wondering if they're incorporating all these other countries in the South Pacific and in that hemisphere. I'm surprised maybe even try to get an American team, maybe like Hawaii, involved in that. I don't know what facilities are like there. I know years ago there used to be a winter league because I don't know how I found it, but this was before the internet. I found out that they had a kind of like a Hawaiian version of the Atlantic League, almost like a fall league there. And I told my parents about it, who happened to be going to Hawaii, and I asked them to pick me up like a couple hats and shirts from there, and I showed them like teams and logos I liked, and they brought them back. Sure enough, they had this one. I forget what they were called, the something Sharks, but it literally looked like, I don't know, almost like a cartoon version of a shark holding a baseball kind of thing. Kind of reminds me of this old Hanna-Barbera cartoon called Jabberjaw. It was kind of like a cutesy shark. It wasn't like a San Jose shark or anything like that, but I don't know, they had some cool stuff there. So I don't know. So that is interesting that they're branching out. I mean, I know our leagues. I mean, we have teams in Canada, and the NFL's been talking about expanding into England, but but good for Australia. I don't know. It's good to know also that their games can be seen on YouTube. So I'm hoping that they get some kind of international expansion. Sounds like they are already, but I mean, as far as viewership too, not just of teams where they play.
It's unfortunate that Hawaiian Winter League that you're talking about only lasted a couple of years. But what's going on in Australia anyway, a lot of Asian players, more so from Japan, but there have been some in Taiwan sprinkled in, do go over there to play winter ball.
Okay.
Because of weather or basic developmental aspect of the ABL rather than the AWB, which stands for Asian Winter Baseball.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I don't know. That might be something might be even more baseball we can watch in the wintertime, so we'll see. I don't know. It's one thing that's surprising. It's kind of like, I feel like I'm finding these layers of more and more baseball leagues here and there, which is good. And, I mean, like I said, I'm seeing it through new eyes. I mean, you're more familiar with some of these international leagues than I, so I don't know. KBO kind of like started me on that path, and then since then, it's like, even though I have long before that wanted to go to Japan, but, I didn't follow them fervently, per se. I just wanted to see games over there and just see their atmosphere and that kind of thing. So, but
it got to a point where I think I told you when we first started talking. If you watch baseball as much as I do, which I am pretty proud to say that I'm in the minority, where I can go like global year round thanks to the World Wide Web.
mm-hmm.
There's very little downtime for an actual game, because you can go from the Asia Leagues, which basically start their regular season in March, mid-March. You have your spring training games or your international friendly series in January, February for exhibition games. There's very little downtime when you consider Asia Leagues, MLB, then you go into winter leagues in the Dominican, Venezuela, Mexico, Puerto Rico. Then you'll hit the Australian leagues, which basically take you into the new year. You might have, if you watch baseball as religiously as I do, maybe 3 weeks where there's not a game.
Wow.
Live somewhere.
That's interesting. And it's also good to know, and it's also good for our show, especially since we're going global and, gives us something to talk about each week. It's like years ago, I did a similar show with a mixed martial artist, and we did a show about that originally, and I kind of had him as a similar role to you, where he was a fighter and he followed those leagues a little more, and I was kind of, for lack of a better term, learning more about MMA as I would be asking him the questions. And that's what we found out with them too. It wasn't just UFC. You had Bellator, you had like a lot of these smaller mixed martial arts companies throughout the country, and each week we were able to find out results and post results about them and actually get to interview fighters over the phone as a result of that. And I thought that made for an interesting show. And like it is with these international baseball leagues, we were able to talk about somebody fighting in a cage somewhere just about every day. I mean, we did a weekly show like this one, but we had results from, several days of fights and fight cards. So, so that was pretty interesting, So it's good to know some things to look forward to in Australia. Have another story out of that same league I'm going to share. I'm sure you're very familiar with this guy, being a New York Yankees fan and the rivalry with the Boston Red Sox. The Sydney Blue Sox swoop on 12-time MLB All-Star Manny Ramirez. This is an article from the CPBL website from columnist David Penrose. It says Sydney has swooped on 12-time Major League Baseball All-Star Manny Ramirez, signing the 48-year-old to a one-year deal. Jeez, he's 48. Good God. It seemed like, I don't know. Makes me feel old. Good Lord. All right. MLB Network's John Heyman tweeted this morning the two-time World Series champion, who was recently linked to Auckland, would join the Blue Sox for an upcoming Australian Baseball League season. And here's more to read. And it said Sydney owner Adam Dobb confirmed to the ABL.com.au Ramirez was on his way to the Blue Sox. As a lifelong Boston Red Sox fan, this is a dream come true, Dobb said. Quote, Manny has been interested in the Australian Baseball League for quite a while now. It was his preference to play down here in a big city, and we're thrilled to have a player of his caliber in Sydney. Ramirez was named MVP in Boston's 2004 World Series title and led the American League for homers during the regular season. He ranks 15th all time with 555 home runs in an MLB career that included stints with Cleveland, the Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, Chicago White Sox, and Tampa Bay. Ramirez last played MLB in 2011 with the Rays and more recently played in an independent league in Japan in 2017. He claimed the Silver Slugger Award on 9 occasions and is a member of Boston's Hall of Fame. So, looks like Manny will be being Manny in Australia this winter. So, I don't know, what's your takes on that?
I gotta tell you, no matter what country he goes to, just because of his flair, he draws. I mean, I remember a few years back, he was actually playing for the team that was then known as the Ida Rhinos before they became Fuban. And there were actual wigs, dread wigs, sold by the Rhino Booster Club and their team store because Manny was such a crowd draw. There's even a YouTube video of one year where it was Manny's birthday and they're celebrating it pregame. Even the broadcasters of the CPBL game that day had Manny wigs. It's a sight to see, like that. So his last team, like you alluded to before, was an independent team in Japan called the Kochi Fighting Dogs.
Oh, jeez.
Who I actually have, and I don't even remember how I got it. A Manny Ramirez Kochi Fighting Dogs towel.
No kidding.
That I got down in Florida somewhere, some way. I don't know. But wherever he goes, he draws a crowd. So he'll be as big of a deal in Australia as he was with Taiwan, etc. More power to him. Sydney has a habit of signing big international stars. Last year and the year before that, I believe they had Gifton Gope.
Oh, okay.
He's out every foreign player that was part of MLB for a while with the Pirates and the Phillies. So Sydney does have a habit of doing that. So if they can draw enough of a popularity through him and maybe get themselves into a playoff situation, it's just another feather in the cap.
Yeah, and I would imagine they're...
If Manny still feels he can play, he's got to play somewhere.
Right. I mean, he's 48 years old, so I don't know. Good for him if he can do it. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of with Ricky Henderson. It seemed like he would never stop playing. I mean, it's like, when did he... You remember when he finally stopped, Eric? I know he was playing, like, independence until, like, he was, like, kind of like in our age range, like in his 50s, I believe. That...
Yeah, he played with the New York Bears in his late 40s. And for those of you that go back a little further, if you remember back in the day when Minoso was playing major leagues for the Chicago White Sox, he was one of those where he would play basically one game per decade, and he actually played, I think, in his 60s. So I think he got like one or two at bats for the White Sox back in the 2000s.
Oh, okay.
Maybe earlier than that. I don't remember quite offhand, but I do remember him getting an at bat in his 60s.
That's incredible.
And it's all about pride.
Right.
Whether your skills are diminished or not, if you feel that you still want to play the game, some people consider it like a carnival act, but if you've still got motivation, more power to you.
Yeah, I guess I figure, too, for merchandise sales and all, it's like I know, I'm sure you're familiar with your area with the Mets organization getting Tim Tebow. I mean, he might I don't think they really expect him to be, the next Darryl Strawberry, but I think they're counting on his name and his number to sell like a lot of merch for their minor league affiliates, I would imagine, and plus to get, just get some publicity and a little bit of splash, kind of like what Sydney's doing with Manny. So.
Yeah, but that was more of a minor league show with a guy like Tebow. The Mets have actually had a history of that. They had at one point, I think, Garth Brooks had signed a minor league contract to play spring training. You have guys like that doing, these little publicity stunts.
Right.
That amounts to nothing. But when you get guys like Manny Minoso, who back in the day was a star player for the White Sox, and he still wanted to do it just for notoriety reasons, and Manny's doing it now, that's more of a legitimate baseball player, not a sideshow.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mets is one extreme to the other. You either have like the one-day contracts or you have the Bobby Bonilla deal. Good Lord.
They're still paying him $1 million a year until eternity, I think.
Whoever Bobby Bonilla's agent who struck that deal with him, that he should be like, if there's a Pro Baseball Hall of Fame for agents, that guy should be in it. That's incredible how he was able to dupe the Mets into doing that. So, all right, folks. Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap things up on Pro Baseball World Tour. Eric, do you have anything you'd like to add before we sign off? Or?
One little final thing, and it's totally local on my end. Little shout out to the Franklin Square Hitmen, whose 12-year team are in the finals of their local travel league. And I've got a bunch of friends, well, actually only one friend on the team, but I've kind of developed a kinship to the thing only because there's such a lack of baseball to actually go to. Watching kids play kind of brings you back to your roots.
Right.
And these guys made it all the way to the Nassau County Finals, and they've got their finals tomorrow. Good luck to the Franklin Square Hitmen. One of the coaches is my good buddy Chris Payne, whose son James Payne is doing quite well, and let's hope they do the same tomorrow in the finals.
All right. Well, definitely good luck to the Franklin Square Hitmen and to your friends. Hopefully they'll pull that off. And I don't know, it seems like you've been good luck for them so far. Good luck to that pitcher in Taiwan. And you can send a little more Marin-back luck over his way for this as well. So, all right, folks. Well, thank you once again for joining us. If you have any comments, please leave them below in YouTube and also in our Facebook groups. If you have any suggestions as far as topics to talk about, please let us know about that as well. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.